Hello, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Before we take up the daily quiz for today, we have a small announcement. Tonight at 8 p.m., our live explain session will be back on our YouTube channel, and Sarmad sir is going to take up a discussion on the topic of electoral bonds. So don't forget to tune into our channel at 8 p.m. sharp. With this, let's get started with the daily quiz for today. The first question: what does sine die represent for a legislative body? Call to vote on an amendment bill following a discussion, interim approval for a part of the budget to keep the government functioning, indicates the final adjournment of an annual session or meeting of a legislative house, loss of confidence of the house in the Council of Ministers. The correct answer would be option C. Sine die, from the perspective of a legislative body, would refer to the final adjournment of an annual session or a meeting of a legislative house. See, this topic has been taken up because we have an article in today's The Hindu newspaper, according to which the parliament has been adjourned sine die nearly 2 weeks ahead of its actual schedule, by keeping in mind the request of the MPs to be allowed to take part in the campaigning to the upcoming state elections. So this brings us to a discussion on various terms related to a parliamentary session. When parliamentary sessions are going on, we often come across terms such as summoning, prorogation, dissolution, and adjournment, and you need to know as to what they exactly mean, as they can be very important for prelims and as well as for mains. Say, with regard to parliamentary sessions, summoning, prorogation, and dissolution, they have been covered under Article 85 of the Indian Constitution. Summoning is the process of calling all the members of the parliament to meet, and it is the duty of the Indian president to summon each house of the parliament, and as mandated by the constitution, the maximum gap between two sessions of parliament cannot be more than 6 months. So basically, in a year, the president has to summon the houses of the parliament at least twice. And in India, the parliament meets for 3 sessions, that is the budget session, the monsoon session, and the winter session. Next, we have adjournment. See, adjournment refers to the suspension of the work of the house for a specified time. That is, within each session, the sittings can be suspended for a certain period of time, maybe for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks. And in case of such adjournment, the time of reassembly is specified. Such an adjournment only terminates that particular sitting and not the entire session itself. This power of adjourning the sitting of a house lies with the presiding officer of the house. Next, we have adjournment sine die, which we referred to in the question. See, sine die is a Latin word which means without a day. This provision is used to terminate a sitting of the parliament for an indefinite period. Basically, the house is adjourned without specifying a time or a date for reassembly, and such an adjournment is known as adjournment sine die. This power also lies with the presiding officer of the house. Next comes prorogation under Article 85, and under this, the session of the house itself is terminated by the president. Prorogation basically terminates both the sitting and the session of the house, and usually after the house is adjourned sine die by the presiding officer, the president issues a notification for the prorogation of the entire session. However, the president can also prorogue the house while it is still in session. When a particular session of the house is prorogued, then all the pending notices, other than those related to introduction of bills, they lapse, and fresh notices will have to be issued for the next session. Then finally, we have dissolution, again covered under Article 85. Dissolution ends the very life of the existing house, and a new house has to be constituted after the general elections. So Rajya Sabha, being a permanent body, it cannot be subjected to any dissolution. So it's only the Lok Sabha which is subjected to dissolution, and this could happen automatically, that is after the term of the Lok Sabha expires after 5 years, or when a national emergency is proclaimed, or when the Council of Ministers lose the confidence of the Lok Sabha. In all these instances, the president can provide for the dissolution of the lower house, and once the Lok Sabha is dissolved, all pending business before the house, including bills, motions, resolutions, etc., they lapse with the dissolution of the house. Now let's look at the second question. Which of the following statements are correct? In the 2021 budget, the government has announced the establishment of Development Financial Institutions or DFIs for infrastructure financing. The concept of DFIs has already been tried and tested, and the first such institution was set up back in 1948. As per the budgetary announcement, the government is seeking to establish the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development. The infrastructure that it plans to fund is only roads and other physical infrastructure. Amongst the given statements, the fourth statement is incorrect. So the correct answer would be option B, 1, 2 and 3 only. See, this question has been asked because according to this article in the Hindu, the Rajya Sabha has passed a bill to establish the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development. In the 2021 budget, the Finance Minister had promised to set up DFIs or Development Financial Institutions with the sole purpose of financing infrastructure creation in the country. See, the DFI model is not entirely new to India because the first such institution was set up back in 1948 itself. When India was following the socialist model of development, the government was seen as the primary driver of infrastructure creation, and many such DFIs were set up in the past, and eventually they were rolled back from 1991 onwards as a result of the economic reforms that were introduced. Because in 1991, the then Finance Minister Manmohan Singh had constituted a committee under Narasimham, and this committee concluded that the era of DFIs had come to an end since it was an inefficient way of funding infrastructure creation. So since then, such DFI institutions were rolled back and they were merged with their respective banks because the DFIs were an inefficient way of funding infrastructure creation following India's economic reforms. See, DFIs are particularly useful in funding such infrastructure projects which are deemed to be risky, and usually commercial banks and private banks, they hesitate to fund such risky infrastructure projects. So when such commercial private participation is missing, the government steps in and through DFIs, it tries to fund such risky infrastructure projects. And the key difference between a DFI and a regular bank is that DFIs do not take in deposits from the people, and instead they raise their money from the government, from the market, and from multilateral institutions such as World Bank and the others. But following the economic reforms of 1991, the cost of borrowing for DFIs increased, and it was noticed that financing infrastructure projects through regular banks was much more cheaper and effective than funding them through the DFIs, where the cost of borrowing was increasing significantly. So following the recommendations of the Narasimham Committee, the DFIs were rolled back. But now in the latest budget, the government has proposed to bring them back, and accordingly, a bill has been introduced in the Parliament to establish the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development. This institution is going to fund the creation of roads and physical infrastructure, and as well as the creation of social infrastructure such as schools, hospitals, etc. But opposition parties have raised questions over the shortcomings in the law because according to them, the bill in its current form does not provide for effective oversight mechanism for the government, and it has several shortcomings such as the protection provided to the management for the decision it takes as an act of good faith. Now this is a very subjective provision because how does one define act of good faith? But however, the government has assured the opposition that this institution would be professionally run and the chairperson shall be appointed by the government after consulting with the RBI. The government has also said that there are sufficient safeguards to hold the institution accountable because the management would be mandated to submit the balance sheets and accounts to the government and the RBI for scrutiny. So initially, this institution is going to come up as a 100% government funded institution, and gradually the government is going to reduce its stakeholding to 26% by involving other banks and multilateral institutions. Now let's look at the third question. Which of the following statements are correct? Indian judiciary is overburdened with pending cases and the backlog of cases stands at over 3.5 crore cases. The highest percentage of pendency is at high courts, followed by the Supreme Court and subordinate courts. To help clear the backlog, The Supreme Court has pushed for the appointment of retired judges to battle pendency of cases in high courts. Such appointment of ad hoc judges has been provided for in the Constitution under Article 224A. Amongst the given statements, the second statement is incorrect, so option D is the right answer. See, it is a fact that the Indian judiciary is overburdened with pending cases, and as of 2019, more than 3.5 crore cases were pending at different tiers of the judiciary. But the highest percentage of pendency is not at the high courts, but instead it is at the subordinate courts. Around 87.3% of the pending cases, they are at the subordinate court level, whereas around 12.5% of the cases are pending at the high courts, and at the Supreme Court, the pendency of cases stands at just around 0.2%. This question has been taken up because according to this article in the Hindu, the Supreme Court has suggested the appointment of retired judges to clear the backlog of cases in high courts. The Supreme Court has said that retired judges could be chosen on the basis of their expertise in a particular field, and they could be appointed on an ad hoc basis to help clear these pending cases at the level of the high courts. According to the Supreme Court, such appointment of ad hoc judges is allowed under the Constitution under Article 224A, and under this article, the Chief Justice of a High Court of any state at any point of time, with the previous consent of the President, can request a retired judge to sit and act as the judge of the High Court under special circumstances. Now let's look at the fourth question. Which of the following statements are correct? North Korea is the only country to have announced its withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty after having acceded to it. North Korea is banned from developing any ballistic missiles under UN Security Council resolutions and is under multiple international sanctions over its weapons programs. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. See, North Korea acceded to the NPT in 1985 and it has become the only country to announce its withdrawal in 2003. However, its withdrawal has not been formally accepted by the NPT. But despite that, North Korea has gone on to develop its nuclear weapons. And along with that, it has even developed and tested ballistic missiles in direct breach of UN Security Council resolutions. This question has been taken up because according to this article in the Hindu, North Korea has launched a fresh set of ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan as a part of its ongoing arms race. These missile tests of North Korea have raised tensions with Japan and South Korea, which perceive a threat from North Korea's weapons program. And this follows the rising tensions between North Korea and the United States, following a brief period of improvement in the relations, when the then US President Donald Trump had held two back-to-back summits with North Korean leader at Singapore and at Hanoi in Vietnam. Now let's take up a question from the 2020 prelims paper. With reference to Indian elephants, consider the following statements. The leader of an elephant group is a female. The maximum gestation period can be 22 months. An elephant can normally go on calving till the age of 40 years only. Among the states in India, the highest population is found in Kerala. The correct answer is option A, 1 and 2 only. The other two statements are incorrect. See, elephant herds are matriarchal in nature and they are led by the oldest female of the group. And the gestation period in elephants is 22 months, but the reproductive age is between 20 to 50 years. Then the highest population of elephants in India is found in Karnataka, not in Kerala. And this makes the third and the fourth statements incorrect, so option A is the right answer. Now coming to the fact of the day, let's look at this article in the Indian Express, which explains why the first interstate tiger relocation project has failed. See, India's first ever interstate tiger translocation project was initiated in 2018 by the National Tiger Conservation Authority in coordination with other stakeholders. Under this project, 2 tigers, one male and one female, were translocated from the Kanha Tiger Reserve and Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve of Madhya Pradesh to the Satkosya Tiger Reserve in Odisha. The objective of this relocation was to reduce the tiger population in those reserve areas where the tiger population was in excess in order to reduce territorial disputes between the tigers, and as well as to reintroduce tigers in areas where the population was considerably low so that the tiger population in these protected areas could be boosted. Under this initiative, the NTCA was planning to relocate 6 tigers in 3 pairs from different reserves of Madhya Pradesh into the Satkosya Tiger Reserve of Odisha. To carry out this translocation, the NTCA had even come out with a set of guidelines by working closely with the Wildlife Institute of India and other government institutions. And while selecting these tigers, 2 key factors were considered by the NTCA. First, they were looking for a dispersing young animal which was yet to find a new mate. And second, they were looking for an adult transient which was yet to establish any territory. So according to this criteria, 2 tigers were selected from Madhya Pradesh and they were translocated to the Satkosya Tiger Reserve, which had been declared by the NTCA as having great potential for increasing its tiger population. Satkosya Protected Area was declared as a tiger reserve in 2007, and back then its tiger population stood at just 12. These numbers reduced to 2 in 2018, and hence the purpose of this translocation was to repopulate the tigers in the Satkosya Tiger Reserve. But however, this ambitious project ran into trouble in the initial weeks itself, because as soon as the tigers were translocated, the local villagers protested against the project, and they even attacked the forest department officials because the forest department and the stakeholders, they had failed to take the villagers into account. They had failed to bring the local villagers on board this conservation project. Following the translocation of these tigers, the local tribal communities in the core areas, they were displaced to the outskirts, and this led the local villagers to fear that the tigers would endanger their livelihoods, their lives, and their livestock. As feared, man-animal conflicts started increasing in the Satkosya Tiger Reserve, and eventually the male tiger became a victim of poaching. And following several attacks on humans in nearby habitations by the female tiger, it was tranquilized and it was brought back to Madhya Pradesh. Eventually, the project had to be suspended by the NTCA, and according to wildlife experts and former officials, the primary reason behind the failure of this project is the fact that the local villagers were not consulted or informed prior to the translocation. As a result, the officials, they failed to build confidence and trust with the local tribes, and this became the key factor that led to the failure of this project. So with this, let's conclude our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.